We'll continue with the panel discussion of why critical thinking is not easy. And this discussion's moderator is going to be Martin Hirsch. So the stage is yours, please.
Hi, and welcome everyone. My name is Martin. I run a Skeptic Cafe, this non-profit organization where we talk about science, critical thinking in bars to create and facilitate this informal atmosphere. And today also we have this very informal title, so why critical thinking is not easy. Because if you followed the news over the last years, critical thinking very often is sold as the solution to all the problems. Russian disinformation, critical thinking and media literacy will solve it. COVID disinformation, COVID conspiracies, critical thinking and media literacy will solve it. But it is not that easy. If it was easy, we would already solve these problems, these big, major issues. And today, to talk about why critical thinking is not that simple, we have two excellent speakers, panelists. We have Artis Svece, he's a philosopher from University of Latvia, and we have Jana Altenberga, from Stockholm School of Economics, from Media Studies Center there. And to open up, how has the world changed in the last decades, years? Why is it harder than ever to orientate yourself in the world we live in currently? Who wants to?
I mean, there are many reasons for that, but probably internet, information age, social media, these all technological changes are one of the main kind of factors that change our world. I mean, but it's not just about the internet, or not, it's not about computerization. It's certain chain effect, domino effect. Yeah, so the changes in technology causes changes in basically every area of our lives.
Yeah, I agree. I guess it's the information age. It's so many sources out there, so many informations. It's really hard to orientate yourself, what to trust, what not to trust, and what may be a very unpopular opinion. But I think the big problem is also in this mindset of everybody can think, everybody can be their own, inspirational leaders. Everybody can be, I don't know, not scientists, but just an experts in everything. And then suddenly you just read one text on Facebook or maybe watch one video and you already feel that you are an expert in the field. And that's what creates a bit of this balance of like who to trust and where do we get our information from.
But if I can add a bit, it's not just, it's not a kind of, it's not an illusion in a way. There are two reasons why I would say we need to be experts. One is democracy. We live in a democracy, and in democracy, every citizen has to take part in decision making. So in a way, every citizen has to be a bit of an expert in COVID, in technologies, in relationships with Belarus and so on, because we vote our representatives and so on. And the second reason is that the nature of labor is changing, and basically and there are good aspects to this phenomenon and bad aspects, but one way of describing it, I think it was in the Economist magazine, that every employee has to more and more think like an employer, like a businessman. You have to look for yourself. You have to make your decisions. Yes, so it's not, I understand what you are saying, so there is this illusion that you are an expert in something, but on the other hand, society requires from us to be experts in everything.
Yeah, I agree, but I think it's also important to add that you can be an expert. I mean, you can try to become an expert or to know much more about a certain topic, but it's again comes to media literacy, maybe an information literacy on choosing where do you get information from. That's important. I guess that's.
Yeah, maybe this usage of the word expert was not a good one. Yeah. So.
And I think there's this contradiction. So each person is entitled to an opinion, but there are different opinions. Some are more based in reality, in facts, in evidence, in expert knowledge. Other opinions are not really that, essentially, well, it doesn't have really real basis. But in this democracy, we have this illusion that each person is an individual with one voice, with one vote. But in reality, so these opinions are not equal very, very often. And that's related to my next question. So if you look at the world, social media, there's more information than ever. It's harder and harder to orientate yourself in the world we live in. Any tips, any tricks, any suggestions to the people watching? So if you live in this world filled with social media, Facebook, information bombarding you all the time, what can you do to take a step back and to orientate yourself in this new digital information world?
May I start? I think it's important to also devote time and attention to, like, when you follow certain sources or news outlets or even influencers, it's fine to gain information from influencers if it's not related to health. But it's important to watch them for a certain amount of time and to analyze what they're saying and to constantly question. And I mean, it always takes time and knowledge. It can't be just somebody tells you that you can trust this source and then you definitely trust the source. You need to also devote your own time and to compare against the knowledge that you already have to see whether that actually fills into your worldview and does it relate to what other experts maybe say, and it's constant evaluation. And I guess with time it gets easier. As soon as you found your source, perhaps you don't have to question it as much as maybe news sources, but I guess a constant re-evaluation and questioning back again too.
This is a very, very good tip because I sometimes teach these things for students and other audiences, and very often at the end I get asked this question, so okay Martin, so what is this media channel that I should watch and trust? But this is the problem, that there are no simple, quick solutions and answers, follow this and you'll know everything about the world. Good quality media also make mistakes. You have to follow, you have to analyze, and you have to think. That's the challenge. Anything to add from you?
The term I'm using is information management. So for some, probably we could manage information, could have managed information in the past as well, but I would say that nowadays you are, I mean, if you want to survive and not get lost, then you have to learn consciously and deliberately manage information. You can't just go along the flow and enjoy whatever information reaches you, whatever books you have or whatever movies you watch. Maybe again 10, 20 years ago it was fine, let's say, to try to see everything. Nowadays it doesn't make sense. So you have now to think about it just like you think about, I don't know, managing your apartment or house or managing your children and their school and so on.
That's also a good point. So 30 years ago, we had Panorama, evening news in Latvia. Everyone watched it. Now we have constant bombardment of information, and there's just so much, and you have to evaluate. So which sources are trustworthy and which aren't that much. And this also applies to the job market. And the information that is out there is much more than previously. There's things that work, things that don't work. What are the skills for the 21st century job market? What are the things that employees are looking in terms of kind of critical thinking, information analysis for their potential people they could hire? Because if we look at, there's a study a couple of years ago at this World Economic Forum. The top leaders, economic leaders, meet there every year or so, and there was a survey among them, and the survey was asking what are these skills that the young people of the 21st century will need, and in top 3, the third was critical thinking in job market. So critical thinking is not just something that's taught in schools, that's relevant for academia, also top employers ask for critical thinking. So what goes underneath this thing for labor market?
Well, of course, I'm not sure if I can speak for employers and those who hire people, but as far as I can tell, these tendencies, then, first of all, there are, right at the moment, huge changes are happening. And one of the reasons is, I would say, partially the panel before us talked about artificial intelligence, and partially that's related to what's happening in artificial intelligence. Namely, we are learning how to do automatically cognitive things, cognitive skills. And so if, again, some time ago we thought that machines could replace some, let's say, physical work, now we know that it can replace cognitive work, mental work. And so what will be needed is, of course, certain kind of combination, not just soft skills, but combination of soft skills like critical thinking, communication, capacity to learn, and something probably else as well. But so all these skills and certain professionalism. Yes, it's not enough to have these soft skills, but they are needed because we meet new situations every moment. Everyone has to know how to talk. Everyone has to know how to present things. Everyone has to think how to make decisions. That's, I would say, something new. No?
Yeah, no, I totally want to first of all add that it's not enough to critically think, just to, you know, it's, I totally agree that you need the base of knowledge, of experience, that, you know, it goes hand in hand. I like to call it that critical thinking is like a software and the knowledge is like a database, so that one cannot survive without another. But just to add to the job market, I think, yeah, it's the ability to basically to evaluate information, to solve problems, crises, to come up with a better solution that is, you know, that's maybe the best for the organization. And we know that I think people are lately maybe one of the most valuable assets for the companies. I mean, I'm also not an employer, so I wouldn't know, but I just feel that, you know, it's so many opportunities, so many companies and services out there that people are the ones, the company, the asset of the company, the people are the ones that make this organization to stand out. And I think the critical thinking, this where comes in the solution, and also a working together environment. It's like a certain platform, certain kind of a way of communicating with each other when you have on the same grounds, when you kind of agree on the same rules, when the way you navigate through life. That's how I see it.
And I think that you said that this learning and relearning again and again and again. The world is changing more rapidly, and there's just it's inevitable. We'll have to face new information. We'll have to essentially face the world, however it changes in the next 5-10 years. And unless you are able to evaluate, able to relearn, you're going to be stuck behind. And these old jobs, some of them are dying already, will lose definitely much more due to both AI and also changes in the world over the next years. Unless people are ready to learn and relearn, they're not going to get much further. And today we've also been talking about critical thinking. So what do you mean when you say critical thinking? And that is a million-dollar question, because critical thinking is not something that's simple and easily answerable. But what do you understand when you say, well, critical thinking is something that's relevant for the job market or everyone in their daily lives? So how do you understand critical thinking as what it is?
I think I'm going to start because after Artis, I don't think I can add anymore. He's an expert. So what I see is critical thinking. I see it as a skill that is constantly practiced. It's constantly adding to it, and it's not something that we're born with, obviously. And it's, as I already mentioned, I think it's a way of kind of navigating through life. It's a way of making decisions, a way of communicating, a way of even evaluating our own thoughts, our own beliefs, our own choices, and yeah, that's how I see it, as a way.
Sure. I can just add that it's again a bit of, I would say, a mistake to imagine that if there is one word, critical thinking, that it's used in the one sense. I would say that there are several meanings that we attach to this word, and I won't enumerate all of them, but I just wanted to mention that when probably when in the context of labor market, we are talking about critical thinking, that people are talking about capacity to think independently and make decisions, something like that. But for example, when we are teaching critical thinking in a university, we usually teaching certain kind of skill of analyzing information, analyzing texts, analyzing argumentation, and that's not the same. So you can be very good in understanding argumentation, and you can have a good skills in debates, which does not mean that when people are writing, we need employees who have critical thinking skills, that they mean that we need good debaters. Yes, so that these are two different things. But talking about university, for me, I think if we are talking about the future, I think that I'm a bit concerned that nowadays we think about critical thinking maybe too narrowly in university context, that we should bring in other topics that are often not discussed, like, so not just argumentation, but also communication, yes, media literacy, rhetorics, which is, I mean, very important in order, let's say, to analyze social media content. I mean, you can't just use argumentation analysis, because there are lots of things that are going on. And another thing that is, I think, lacking in the way we teach critical thinking at the moment is visual communication, visual literacy. I mean, in contemporary world, in social media, visual messages are big part of communication. And when you stop with analysis of premises and conclusions, you lose that. You don't understand that.
I think that's a very good point. If you look at the world now, even if you are very well versed in critical thinking, media literacy, and these other things you mentioned, but you might not be an expert in other topics. Let's say, I don't know, history of China. And even if you are a critical thinker, even if you have all these skills, if you don't know anything about China, someone can fool you easily because you don't have some basic knowledge skill set. For example, a good example is about vaccines over the last months. There are people who don't have basic knowledge about chemistry, and then they read the ingredient list of vaccines, and there are horrible sounding names in these ingredient lists. And they don't have the basic fact of chemistry that all, basically, apples, all food products are made of chemical elements. It's inevitable. Everywhere there are these scary sounding names. If you don't have this basic knowledge about chemistry, you can get fooled by conspiracy theorists about the contents of vaccines. But going back a little bit to this media literacy aspect, critical thinking. So any maybe kind of suggestions, tips for the viewers. So how do social media work? How to be more careful when you enter social media? Because I know that Baltic that SSC Riga, you've done a couple of studies and also trainings on these things. Any suggestions to viewers how to be more careful online when you come across some crazy stories about conspiracies?
I guess, I mean, one of the main things, and I think most of the people probably know by now already, that you have to pay attention to emotional, charged messages with a lot of sort of like sounding words and alerts of a lot of exclamation signs, and that's the first that gives you a warning. That's probably something that's going to try to influence me. And then the other is obviously seeing how, are you getting emotional when you come across the social media post or whatever. It means that it's already done a certain influential kind of thing to you. But also we need to remember about those bubbles that that happen in social media, that the algorithms are built in the way that it gives you more content, the same of the content that you engage with already, because it wants you to spend more time on social media, it wants you to swipe more, to like, engage, and it will give you the content that you like. And at one point you end up that you have all the same information, and you think that there's the only one that there is. You can't even if you really wanted to, it probably wouldn't be that easy to find some, opposing view of the certain topic.
And I think this is very relevant. Essentially, like 20, 30 years ago, parents taught kids, do not enter strange cars. If someone gives you candy, don't follow. Now, essentially very similar things. If you see something emotional online, take a step back. That's a red flag if something emotional is trending online, because basically the kind of basic fact about social media is that the story that everything is fine, everything's okay, it is not going to trend. Story, everything's horrible, everything's going wrong, or even the vice versa, everything's great, everything's amazing. That's something that is going to get shares, likes, comments, not the story that everything is fine.
Yeah, but again, of course, if you know that you don't have to accept an invitation to step into a stranger's car, this is kind of, I would say, well, there are very few cases when you can make mistake when you don't do that. Yes, but you can't filter all emotions. So the problem is that emotions are fine, communication is fine. You can't, to believe that if you give some facts, then it's somehow objective. It's simply wrong, because these facts are always selected. There is no news item, no text, no programs that does not select facts. So you must be cautious also when it's objective. But the important thing is what we are trying now to somehow encourage is, to think critically, to reflect, to stop for a moment, yes, and ask, so what is going on? Emotions are fine, yes, but it's not fine to allow them to influence them uncritically. It's a bit dangerous in contemporary world.
I think this illustrates discussions about critical thinking very well. You can give this tip. Well, if you see something extremely emotional, well, that's a red flag, but not always.
Sure.
Emotions are normal, because this is the problem with critical thinking, that there are no kind of black and white answers. There are no 5 simple steps you can follow, and you'll think critically always.
Sure.
That's the biggest issue. Maybe any other tips? So there are, as I said, there are no tips, but maybe something that you can give to the viewers to evaluate information online. If you see something emotional, take a step back. So information bubbles. So really kind of take mental note.
Is it possible to avoid information bubbles?
Yeah, you have to engage with but I think if you specifically do engage and follow people that you usually wouldn't follow, or you're not even interested in that content, maybe you can break that algorithm. But still, I think it would recognize as much the one that you engage more with.
Yeah, so the problem is, in a way, the time. So one doesn't have time to. Of course, you can find information and so on, but it all takes your energy. I don't know what to suggest.
I think even when we said about the critical thinking, that it's not easy, and why it's not easy, obviously it takes time, and you need to invest, and you always have to evaluate everything critically. But I think also, given the circumstances we live in, it's a fast world, it's good to find some sources that you actually trust, and maybe then you don't evaluate them as maybe critically anymore. And obviously from time to time you do need to do that, but it's good to find certain, I don't know, journalists or media outlets or maybe scientists that you trust, and check back on what they think about that, if that's something new. But yeah, and again, that could be another mistake that it can lead to, but
Well, I think even taking a step back, I think the first thing is just starting reading the news. Because, for example, I've done focus groups and interviews in Latvia, and some of the young people say that they trust influencers because influencers, they invest a lot of time in making their videos. They do a lot of research. unlike journalists, of course, and unlike experts, and unlike other researchers. And that was a very, very good quote that I quite like to repeat, because that shows that essentially influencers, because they're relevant, because they are more relatable, they're perceived as more trustworthy, although journalists, experts do the same thing, much more actually in depth than influencers. And for some reason, the people the person I was interviewing didn't see journalists as doing that. And that's also quite relevant, that essentially kind of getting people to actually consume media, real news, because there's so much of stuff that looks like news stories online and social media that it's very hard to pick up what is real and what is basically just someone shouting very loudly or emotionally his or her opinion online. And well, we're essentially getting close to the end. We've talked about different kind of things about social media, but in daily lives, when you see someone who believes in I don't know, conspiracies, nonsense, what is your recommendation? Should you try to discuss this with the person, try to convince, fact check, try to essentially enlighten the person, or maybe let's not even try to fight with conspiracy theorists, with people who believe in crazy nonsense, because this has been the big topic for people over the last year and a half with COVID. We've all met people who believe in crazy things. What to do with that?
Well, I mean, we know the answer. This has been discussed a lot, and the answer is unfortunately not very helpful. It's hard. Sometimes it's impossible. So, first of all, of course, it's futile strategy to prove that this person is simply wrong. I mean, that doesn't work. I mean, I would say this is a general kind of agreement. Second thing is to try to understand this other point of view. And if I have to suggest some kind of strategy for communication or for critical thinking, then I would say that one should not forget this goal besides analysis of argumentation. So you analyze, that's one thing. But another thing is to try to understand what the person is saying. Yes, why this person is thinking like that. And ultimately, I would say that one of the suggestions is that one can try to provide some alternative version, not just negative arguments, but some positive ways. But maybe we could look at the thing in some other way. Yes, but yes, so. Just plain, direct opposition to some other point, it seems does not really work.
I have one very good tip, because I had spent a lot of time at the beginning of pandemics and I was exhausted, and I learned, and it's also with my family, I had problem with my family as well, some of them, and I learned that asking questions helps, because when you ask them a question, what do you think is this way, and then when they try to give you an answer, they actually feel like, oh, maybe something doesn't line up there, and that actually helps instead of just kind of bombarding them with the alternative information.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Confrontation, I think, is kind of the least productive way. Trying to ask questions, definitely one thing, or trying to essentially understand why people believe what they believe. Because very often, belief in conspiracies has deeper roots. People mistrust doctors because in the childhood, someone did something bad. They mistrust government because government sucks. So there's something underneath the surface thing that COVID is a conspiracy or something like that.
Yeah, and I think that's important to understand that whether the issue that we are debating is really about vaccination. Yes, maybe it's something else. And so even if you now prove that vaccination is good or whatever, it doesn't solve the problems that's behind it. So I think it's a really very important point.
Yep, maybe the problem is that you don't trust doctors. You're not going to trust doctors.
Or elite.
Yep.
Like here, we 3 experts.
So, and I think in these last 30 minutes, we've been quite successful in showing that critical thinking is not easy. It is a complicated topic. Even if you know some basic critical thinking skills, you're not going to know everything. You're going to make mistakes, and to make mistakes is human. But as you said, it is possible to learn. It is possible to relearn. It is possible to increase our critical thinking skills over time. We're not born as critical thinkers. We learn these things over time. And this is, I guess, our wish to you, the viewers. We hope that with this short talk, this panel, you'll become a bit more critically thinking, and you'll be on this path of increasing your critical thinking skills over next years, decades, and all your lives. Thank you.
Yeah. And before we end it with this panel discussion, we actually do have a question from our online viewers. And the question is, do you think people's attitude towards media literacy will have improved after pandemic?
Well, for some, for sure. Hard to say about all people. What people's attitude? I don't know. It's hard to tell. But sure. I mean, the interest in media, in let's say in this question of persuasion, it has grown dramatically. So we will have new knowledge for sure. Whether it's kind of general interest, I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think media literacy has become kind of a buzzword that some people try to even avoid. But I think we can see that it's a necessary skill that we just not need to start with the childhood. So it's, important skill.
It's here to stay.
Forever.
After.
See. Well, thank you so much for this panel discussion. It was wonderful to hear it.